Did you know that in the history of professional boxing, some of the most unforgettable moments come from underdogs? Now, imagine this. A virtually unknown black fighter steps into the ring against Tyson Fury, the undefeated heavyweight champion, and shocks the entire world. This isn't just a boxing match, it's the ultimate David versus Goliath story, packed with grit, determination, and a twist no one saw coming. This is the story of James "The Rock" Turner, a fighter from Detroit who didn't have fame, a big-name trainer, or even a decent pair of gloves when he started. What he did have: heart. But how did a man the world had written off manage to take down the king of heavyweight boxing? Stick around, you won't believe how it all unfolded. The rain hammered down on the streets of Detroit, bouncing off cracked sidewalks and rusting car roofs. For James Turner, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing inside him. Standing in the tiny boxing gym he called home, James wrapped his hands with worn-out gauze, the edges frayed from months of overuse. The gym wasn't much: a couple of punching bags patched up with duct tape, a ring with sagging ropes, and mirrors so cracked they barely reflected his silhouette. But it was enough for a man like James, who had learned long ago that you didn't need much to fight. You just needed heart. "Yo, James, you good?" a voice called from the doorway. It was Malik, his childhood friend and unofficial cheerleader. Malik was skinny as a rail, always sporting a crooked grin that hinted at trouble. He leaned against the doorframe, holding a greasy paper bag. "Brought you a burger. Thought you could use some fuel." James looked up, sweat dripping from his forehead. "Appreciate it, Malik, but I'm good." "Man, you gotta eat," Malik said, stepping inside and tossing the bag onto a nearby bench. "You can't knock dudes out on an empty stomach." James smirked but didn't respond. He wasn't in the mood for small talk. His mind was focused on the upcoming regional match, a chance to finally prove himself as more than just another Detroit kid with a dream. James didn't fight just because he loved it, he fought because he had to. His mom worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices by day and waiting tables by night, all to keep the lights on in their tiny apartment. His younger brother, Darnell, looked up to him like he was Superman, even though James often felt more like Clark Kent without the glasses. Boxing was James's way out. It was his way of making sure his mom didn't have to work herself into an early grave, and that Darnell could go to college instead of following the same hard path James had taken. "All right, break time's over," a gravelly voice interrupted. Coach Hank stepped into the gym, his presence as commanding as ever. Hank was a retired boxer with a face that told 1,000 stories, scarred eyebrows, a nose broken more times than James could count, and a permanent scowl that somehow felt fatherly. "You're moving too slow, Turner," Hank barked. "Fury ain't gonna wait for you to catch your breath. Now get back to the bag." James nodded, tightening his wraps. He didn't need Hank to tell him how serious this was. Every punch he threw was a step closer to his dream, or a step back. 2 weeks later, the gym phone rang. Hank answered, his voice gruff as always. "Yeah, this is Hank. Who's asking?" James watched from the corner of the ring, wiping sweat from his brow as Hank's expression shifted. The old coach's scowl softened, replaced by something James hadn't seen in years: excitement. Yeah, he's ready. No question about it," Hank said into the receiver. "We'll be there." Hank hung up the phone and turned to James, his eyes gleaming. "You're not gonna believe this, kid. Tyson Fury's camp just called. They need a last-minute replacement for a fight." James froze. "Fury? As in the Tyson Fury?" "Yeah, the champ himself. One of his opponents backed out. They're looking for someone to fill in." James's heart raced. This was it, the kind of opportunity that only came once in a lifetime. But as quickly as the excitement hit, doubt crept in. "Coach, I'm not ready for Fury. I mean, he's Fury." Hank walked over, gripping James's shoulder. "Listen to me, Turner. You've got heart, and that's something Fury can't train for. This is your shot. You take it, or you spend the rest of your life wondering what if." That night, James lay awake in his cramped apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Fury's face flashed in his mind, smirking, confident, untouchable. The world would laugh at the thought of James Turner stepping into the ring with him. But then he thought about his mom, her tired hands scrubbing floors, and Darnell, sitting at the kitchen table, scribbling college applications they couldn't afford. He clenched his fists. "I'm doing it," he whispered to himself. The decision had been made, but the moment James Turner said yes to the fight, the world around him shifted. Word spread quickly in the boxing community, and the reactions weren't exactly encouraging. The morning after James agreed to the fight, Malik burst into the gym, phone in hand. Yo, James, you're all over social media. James was mid-jab, his knuckles raw from hitting the bag. He dropped his gloves and took the phone. On the screen was a headline: Tyson Fury vs. no-name fighter? A joke of a matchup. His stomach sank as he scrolled through the comments. They weren't kind. This kid's gonna get murdered in the first round. Why even bother? Fury's fighting a punching bag. Who's James Turner? Never heard of him. Next, James handed the phone back to Malik, his jaw tight. Let them talk, he said, but the words tasted bitter. He'd always known he was the underdog, but seeing the world's doubt in black and white made it hit harder. Coach Hank wasn't one for sentimentality. When James showed up to the gym that afternoon, the older man was already setting up drills. All right, Turner, enough reading trash. We've got work to do. For the next 2 weeks, James trained harder than ever. His mornings started before the sun rose, running 5 miles through the streets of Detroit. Hank had him sparring with guys twice his size, testing his endurance. Fury's got power, sure, Hank said during one session, but power's nothing if you can't land a punch. Your job is to be a ghost, move fast, stay light, make him miss. He gets tired, and that's when you hit. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. By the end of each day, James's body ached in ways he didn't think were possible. His feet were blistered, his hands swollen, and his shoulders burned with exhaustion. One evening, after a grueling sparring session, James sat on the edge of the ring, staring at his gloves. Malik approached, holding out a bottle of water. You good, man? Malik asked. James nodded, though his face betrayed his uncertainty. I don't want to embarrass myself, you know? This fight's bigger than me. Bigger than you. Malik scoffed. James, you're fighting for the whole neighborhood. Hell, for every kid who's ever been told they're not good enough. Win or lose, you're already a legend. One afternoon, while James was shadowboxing, a familiar face walked into the gym. It was Reggie Mason, a local promoter who had once laughed in James's face when he asked for a chance to fight professionally. Well, Reggie said, clapping slowly. The kid actually made it. Fighting Fury? Huh. Gotta admit, I didn't see that coming. James dropped his stance and turned to face him. What do you want, Reggie? Reggie smirked, pulling out a business card. Just wanted to wish you luck. And, you know, maybe if you survive, we can talk about some real opportunities. James stared at the card but didn't take it. I'll survive. And when I do, I won't need your help. Reggie chuckled, sliding the card onto a nearby bench. We'll see about that, Turner. We'll see. As Reggie walked out, Hank shook his head. Don't waste your time on guys like him. They only show up when they smell money. A week before the fight, the gym was broken into. James arrived early that morning to find the heavy bag slashed open, the weights stolen, and the mirrors shattered. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. Hank surveyed the damage, his face unreadable. They're trying to get in your head, Turner. Don't let them. James clenched his fists. They think this'll stop me? I'll train in the damn street if I have to. And that's exactly what he did. For the next few days, James and Hank moved their sessions outside, in the park, on the basketball courts, anywhere with enough space. At first, it felt humiliating, but soon the community rallied around him. Kids brought him water bottles. Local musicians set up speakers, blasting motivational songs. A group of elderly women even brought folding chairs, clapping and cheering for every punch. This ain't just your fight anymore, Hank said one afternoon, watching as a crowd gathered to support James. You've got the whole city behind you now. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Tyson Fury wasn't paying James much attention. For him, this was just another warm-up fight, a tune-up before a bigger title defense. Turner. Fury said during an interview. I don't know much about him. I'm sure he's a nice lad, but let's be honest, he's stepping into the lion's den. He won't last 3 rounds. Behind the bravado, though, Fury was feeling the pressure. The undefeated champion had built his career on being untouchable. A loss, even to a top contender, could tarnish his legacy. Losing to an unknown like James Turner? That was unthinkable. The night before the fight, James couldn't sleep. He lay on his lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. Every punch Fury had ever thrown played out in his head. The highlight reels, the knockouts. Could he really do this? His mom knocked softly on the door before stepping in. She carried a plate of fried chicken, his favorite, and set it on the bedside table. You nervous? She asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. A little, James admitted. She smiled, brushing a hand over his hair. You've already won, baby. No matter what happens tomorrow, You've shown the world who you are, and that's more than enough." James swallowed hard, nodding. Her words didn't erase the fear, but they gave him strength. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everyone who had ever believed in him. The energy at the arena was electric. Lights blazed down on the glossy canvas of the ring, and the roar of thousands of voices echoed through the massive venue. Cameras panned across the crowd, capturing celebrities in designer suits and kids in oversized Tyson Fury shirts. The night wasn't just a boxing match, it was an event, and James Turner was walking straight into the Lion's Den. James stepped off the team bus, wearing a simple hoodie with the words "Detroit Grit" scrawled across the chest. No entourage, no flashy suit, just him, Coach Hank, and Malik. The crowd outside barely noticed him, most too busy trying to catch a glimpse of Fury. "Keep your head up," Hank muttered, patting James on the back as they pushed through the backstage entrance. James nodded, his jaw clenched. The arena felt massive, almost suffocating, but he focused on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. He'd been here before, not in a stadium this big, but in moments just as daunting. Fury's arrival couldn't have been more different. A fleet of SUVs pulled up, and out stepped the undefeated champion, flanked by his team. Cameras flashed as Fury waved to the crowd, his signature smirk plastered across his face. He was dressed in a gold-trimmed robe, looking every bit the king he believed himself to be. Inside the locker room, James watched Fury's entrance on the small TV mounted in the corner. Fury was dancing, hyping up the crowd, basking in their adoration. Malik glanced at James. "Man, he's putting on a whole concert out there." "Don't let it get in your head." "It's not," James said, but his eyes stayed locked on the screen. The locker room was quiet now, save for the rhythmic thud of Hank's hands against the pads as James warmed up. Every punch felt sharper, every movement quicker. James had spent the last 6 weeks preparing for this, and now, it all came down to this moment. "You ready?" Hank asked, holding James's gloves as he tightened the laces. James nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." Malik grinned, holding up his phone to snap a picture. "The last shot before you shock the world, man." The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Introducing first, the challenger, James "The Rock" Turner. The reaction was mixed, polite applause from some, boos from Fury's fans. James walked out alone, his hood up, head down, blocking out the noise. The bright lights hit him like a wave, but he didn't flinch. This was his moment. As he climbed into the ring, he glanced at the crowd. Somewhere up there, his mom and Darnell were watching. He clenched his fists. This wasn't just a fight, it was everything. The crowd erupted as the lights dimmed and music blasted through the speakers. Fury made his entrance like a king returning to his throne. He wore a robe covered in gold sequins, a crown perched on his head. His team carried a faux throne behind him, playing up the drama. Fury waved, laughing and pointing at fans. When he reached the ring, he turned to James, smirking. "You nervous, lad?" "Don't worry, I'll make it quick." James didn't respond. He just stared at Fury, his expression calm but focused. Fury shrugged, turning back to his corner. "Suit yourself," he muttered. The bell rang, and the fight was on. Fury came out aggressive, throwing quick jabs to test James's defense. James dodged and blocked, staying light on his feet, just like Hank had drilled into him. But Fury was no amateur. By the end of the first round, he landed a brutal right hook that sent James stumbling into the ropes. The crowd roared, already sensing an early knockout. Back in his corner, Hank shoved a water bottle into James's hand. "Stay with a plan. He's testing you, let him think you're weak. He'll get cocky, and that's when you strike." James nodded, spitting blood into a bucket. "I got this." In the second and third rounds, James started to settle in. He used his speed to stay just out of Fury's reach, dodging punches that could have ended the fight. Fury's frustration was visible, he wasn't used to missing. By the fourth round, James managed to land a few solid shots of his own. A quick jab to Fury's ribs, a sharp uppercut that snapped Fury's head back. The crowd started to murmur. This wasn't the easy fight they'd expected. The fifth round was brutal. Fury caught James with a devastating uppercut, sending him sprawling to the canvas. The referee started the count. 1, 2, 3. James's vision blurred, but he forced himself to his feet by the count of 8. The crowd cheered, impressed by his resilience, but Hank's face was grim. "You all right?" Hank asked as James stumbled back to the corner. "I'm good," James said, though his legs felt like jelly. "Good. Now fight like your life depends on it, because it does." James came out swinging in the sixth round. He landed a series of quick jabs, using his speed to keep Fury on his heels. For the first time, Fury looked tired. His punches were slower, his movements less sharp. "Stay on him!" Hank shouted from the corner. James saw an opening and took it, a clean left hook that caught Fury off guard. The champion stumbled, and the crowd erupted. Suddenly, this wasn't a mismatch, it was a fight. As the bell rang, Fury returned to his corner, breathing heavily. His coach slapped his shoulder, yelling instructions, but Fury waved him off. Across the ring, James sat with his head down, focusing on his breathing. Malik leaned over the ropes, grinning. "You got this, man." "You're in his head." Hank nodded. "He's tiring. 2 more rounds, and he's yours." James clenched his fists. "Let's finish this." The 7th round began with a crack of the bell, and the crowd roared back to life. Both fighters stood in their corners, drenched in sweat, their bodies showing the toll of the previous rounds. James Turner adjusted his gloves, his eyes locked on Tyson Fury. He wasn't just in the fight anymore, he was in Fury's head. James came out quick, moving side to side, his footwork sharp and calculated. Fury's confidence seemed to falter as his punches became more labored. The champion still had power, but James could see it. His stamina was fading. "Keep moving, keep moving." Coach Hank shouted from the corner. James ducked under Fury's jab and countered with a swift right hook to the ribs. Fury grunted, the blow visibly shaking him. The crowd gasped, the realization setting in. This wasn't going to be the easy victory everyone had expected. Fury retaliated with a looping hook, but James ducked just in time, landing an uppercut that snapped Fury's head back. For a brief second, the champion looked stunned, his legs wobbling as he backed away. "Stay on him, Turner!" Hank roared. James pressed forward, landing another jab before the bell ended the round. As he walked back to his corner, the noise from the crowd was deafening. If Fury was shaken, he didn't show it in the 8th round. He came out swinging, using his sheer size and power to push James into the ropes. A massive hook landed on James's jaw, and the arena erupted as the underdog stumbled. James's head spun, his vision blurred, but he refused to go down. He clinched Fury, buying precious seconds to recover. The referee separated them, and James took a deep breath, focusing on Fury's movements. "Don't let him bully you," Hank yelled from the corner. With renewed determination, James fought back, dodging Fury's wild punches and landing a clean left hook that sent the champion reeling. The round ended with both fighters visibly exhausted, but James's resilience had the crowd on their feet. By the 9th round, Fury's frustration was palpable. He threw wild, heavy punches, hoping to end the fight with one clean shot. But James had studied his moves. He danced around Fury, forcing the larger man to chase him. "Make him work," Hank shouted. "He's gassed." James saw the opportunity and landed a quick combination, jab, jab, cross. Fury stumbled, and for the first time in the fight, the champion looked vulnerable. "You've got him," Malik yelled from the sidelines, his voice barely audible over the crowd. Fury managed to land a glancing blow, but it wasn't enough. The round ended with James standing tall, his confidence growing. The crowd began to chant his name. "Turner! Turner! Turner!" As the 10th round began, both fighters were running on pure adrenaline. Fury's punches were slower now, his movements heavy. James, though battered, still had speed on his side. "Stay focused," Hank said, his voice calm but firm. "This is your moment." The fighters circled each other, their eyes locked. Fury threw a lazy jab, and James saw his opening. He ducked under the punch and unleashed a devastating combination, a right hook to the ribs, a left uppercut, and finally perfectly timed right cross. The punch landed square on Fury's jaw, and the champion crumpled to the canvas. The crowd erupted, the noise deafening as the referee began the count. 1, 2, 3. Fury stirred, trying to push himself up, but his arms gave out. 4, 5, 6. The realization hit James, he might actually win this. 7, 8, 9, 10. The referee waved his arms, signaling the end of the fight. James Turner had done the unthinkable. He had knocked out Tyson Fury. The arena exploded into chaos. Fans screamed, reporters scrambled, and James dropped to his knees in the center of the ring, tears streaming down his face. He had done it. The kid from Detroit, the underdog no one believed in, had just defeated one of the greatest boxers of all time. Hank rushed into the ring, pulling James into a tight hug. "You did it, kid. You actually did it." Malik was right behind him, shouting at the top of his lungs. "That's my boy. That's my boy." Across the ring, Fury sat slumped into his corner, a towel draped over his shoulders. Despite the loss, he managed a small smile and nodded at James. It wasn't the ending he had expected, but he couldn't deny the respect he now had for the man who had just bested him. A microphone was shoved into James's face as the crowd chanted his name. The reporter's voice was barely audible over the noise. "James, you've just pulled off one of the greatest upsets in boxing history. How does it feel?" James wiped his face, his voice cracking with emotion. "This isn't just my win. This is for everyone who's ever been told they can't. For my mom, my brother, my city. We did this together." The reporter smiled. "What's next for you?" James looked into the camera, his eyes blazing. "Anything's possible now. Detroit, this one's for you." As James left the ring, he was swarmed by fans and reporters, but his focus was on one thing: his family. He found his mom and Darnell in the crowd, their faces streaked with tears. "You did it, baby," his mom said, pulling him into a hug. Darnell grinned, holding up his phone. "You're trending everywhere, James. You're a legend." James smiled, finally letting the weight of the moment sink in. He wasn't just a fighter anymore, he was an inspiration. The morning after the fight, Detroit woke up different. The sun seemed to shine a little brighter, the air felt lighter, and on every street corner, people were talking about one thing: James Turner's victory. The kid from their neighborhood had done the impossible. He had beaten Tyson Fury. James's mom's phone hadn't stopped ringing since sunrise. Friends, relatives, and even people she hadn't spoken to in years were calling to congratulate her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hand, beaming with pride as Darnell scrolled through social media. "Mom, look at this," Darnell said, turning the phone toward her. It was a tweet from a famous actor. "James Turner equals proof that the underdog can win. What a fight." James walked into the kitchen, still moving stiffly from the fight. He was greeted with a hug from his mom and a high five from Darnell. "You're famous now," Darnell said, grinning. James laughed softly. "I'm just me, man. Nothing's changed." But he knew that wasn't entirely true. Everything had changed. By midday, James was on every major news outlet. ESPN, CNN, even talk shows wanted an interview with a man who had shocked the world. Malik, now unofficially acting as James's manager, was fielding calls left and right. "Good Morning America wants you on tomorrow," Malik said, pacing the room. "And there's a documentary crew asking for a sit-down. Oh, and Nike just emailed me. They want a meeting." James shook his head, overwhelmed. "Man, I don't even own a pair of Nikes." Malik grinned. "Well, they're about to pay you to wear them." Meanwhile, Tyson Fury held his own press conference. Despite the loss, Fury was gracious in defeat. "James Turner fought with heart, and that's something you can't train for," Fury said, his face still bruised from the fight. "He deserved the win, and I respect him for it. But don't count me out yet. I'll be back." Fury's words sent shockwaves through the boxing world. Fans and analysts began speculating about a potential rematch, but for James, the focus wasn't on what was next, it was on taking a moment to breathe. A week after the fight, James returned to the gym where it all started. The building was packed with kids, parents, and neighbors, all waiting to see their hometown hero. When James walked in, the crowd erupted into cheers. Coach Hank stood at the front, grinning proudly. All right, settle down," he said, raising his hands. "We're here to celebrate James, but more importantly, we're here to show these kids that dreams aren't just for other people, they're for us, too." James stepped forward, holding up his hands to quiet the crowd. "I'm just a kid from this neighborhood, like all of you. I started here, in this gym, with nothing but a dream. And now, I'm here to tell you that if I can do it, so can you." The crowd cheered again, and James spent the rest of the afternoon talking to kids, signing gloves, and even sparring lightly with some of the older teens. He announced that he was donating part of his fight earnings to renovate the gym and provide scholarships for young athletes. "This place gave me a chance," James said. "Now it's time to pay it forward." As the weeks passed, James's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. Endorsements rolled in, and his name became synonymous with resilience. But with fame came challenges. Reporters dug into his past, publishing stories about his struggles growing up. Some praised his rise, while others questioned whether he could handle the pressure of staying on top. "You're gonna hear a lot of noise," Hank warned one day during training. "Don't let it distract you. Focus on what matters, being the best version of yourself." James nodded, but the weight of expectation was hard to ignore. Every time he stepped into the gym, He felt the eyes of the world watching. James's victory had a profound impact, not just on his own life, but on the lives of those around him. In Detroit, local businesses saw a surge in support as people rallied to uplift their community. Schools invited James to speak at assemblies, where he told students to dream big, even when the world tells you no. One of the kids James met was a shy 13-year-old named Marcus, who reminded him of himself at that age. Marcus had been bullied for being small, but after hearing James's story, he decided to join the gym. "I want to be like you someday," Marcus told James, his eyes shining with determination. "You'll be better than me," James said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just keep working hard." In the months following the fight, James opened a boxing academy in Detroit, using the funds from his endorsements. The academy wasn't just about training champions, it was about giving kids a safe place to grow, learn discipline, and believe in themselves. The walls of the gym were lined with photos from James's journey, from his early days sparring on broken-down equipment to his victory over Fury. Above the entrance was a simple message: dream big, fight hard. Just as James began settling into his new life, the buzz around a rematch with Tyson Fury grew louder. Fury himself added fuel to the fire, calling out James in interviews. "I want another shot," Fury said. "James Turner is a great fighter, but I'm still the best in the world. Let's settle this." The world waited for James's response, but he stayed quiet, focusing on his academy and training in private. When reporters asked him about the rematch, he simply said, "I'm always ready for a fight. We'll see." It had been 6 months since James Turner shocked the world by defeating Tyson Fury, and while his life had transformed in ways he never imagined, one question loomed over everything: would there be a rematch? The world wanted it. Tyson Fury demanded it. And deep down, James knew it was inevitable. For James, life after the fight had been a whirlwind of interviews, endorsements, and public appearances. But no matter how far he traveled, he always found his way back to the gym in Detroit. One afternoon, James was wrapping up a session with a group of kids at his new academy when Malik burst through the doors, waving his phone. "Yo, James." Fury's at it again. James raised an eyebrow. "What now?" Malik played a clip of Fury on a sports talk show. The former champion leaned back in his chair, a cocky grin on his face. "Listen, I respect James Turner. The kid's got heart, but let's not kid ourselves, he got lucky. Everyone knows I wasn't at my best at night. I want my belts back, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes." James sighed, setting down his gloves. "He's never gonna let this go, is he?" "Can you blame him?" Malik said. "He's got a legacy to protect. Question is, what are you gonna do about it?" Later that week, James and Hank sat in a dimly lit conference room, facing a team of promoters. The head of the group, a sharp-dressed man with slicked back hair, slid a contract across the table. "This is it, gentlemen. A rematch at Madison Square Garden. The biggest venue, the biggest stage. Pay-per-view numbers through the roof. The world wants to see it, and we're ready to make it happen." James glanced at Hank, who gave a slight nod. "What's the catch?" James asked. The promoter chuckled. "No catch. Just two fighters proving who's the best. We'll double your purse from the last fight," and Fury's agreed to the terms. "All we need is your signature." James stared at the contract, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just another fight. It was a chance to prove that his victory wasn't a fluke, that he belonged among the greats. "All right," James said, picking up the pen. "Let's do it." With a rematch officially announced, the pressure was on. Fury wasted no time promoting the fight, flooding social media with videos of his intense training sessions. But James wasn't interested in the theatrics. He went back to basics, training harder than ever under Hank's watchful eye. "Last time, we were the underdogs," Hank said as James pummeled a heavy bag. "This time, you're the champion. Everyone's watching, waiting to see if you can hold on to that title. Don't let it get to you." "I won't," James grunted, landing a sharp hook. But Hank wasn't convinced. "You say that now, but fame messes with people. Stay grounded, Turner. Remember why you started this." As the fight drew closer, Detroit rallied behind James once again. The streets were lined with posters of their hometown hero, and local businesses held fundraisers to support his academy. One day, James visited a high school to speak to students about his journey. After his talk, a young girl approached him, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mr. Turner, do you ever get scared?" she asked. James crouched down to her level, his expression softening. "All the time," he admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're about to do something brave." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Tyson Fury was a man on a mission. Losing to James Turner had been a wake-up call, and he was determined to reclaim his title. In one interview, Fury spoke candidly about the loss. "That fight humbled me. I took James lightly, and it cost me. This time, I'm not making the same mistake. I've been training harder than ever, and come fight night, I'll remind the world why I'm the Gypsy King." His words were backed by action. Fury's training camp was grueling, his focus sharper than ever. He studied James's every move, looking for weaknesses to exploit. As fight night approached, James felt the pressure mounting. The media scrutiny was relentless, and every move he made was dissected by fans and critics alike. One evening, he sat alone in the gym, staring at his gloves. Hank found him there, his face lined with concern. "You all right?" Hank asked, sitting beside him. James shook his head. What if they were right? What if it was just luck? Hank slapped him on the back. "Luck doesn't get you through 10 rounds with Tyson Fury. You earned that win, and you'll earn this one too. Stop doubting yourself." James nodded, though the doubts lingered in the back of his mind. In the last days before the fight, James retreated into solitude, shutting out the noise and focusing solely on his training. He watched footage of his first fight with Fury, studying every mistake he'd made. By the time he boarded the plane to New York, James felt ready. Nervous, yes, but ready. As the plane descended, Malik nudged him. "You hear that?" James frowned. "Hear what?" "The world. They're buzzing about you, man. This is it. Time to make history again." The night before the fight, James sat in his hotel room, staring out at the New York skyline. The city buzzed with energy, but inside, everything was still. His mom called, her voice warm and steady. "You feeling okay, baby?" "Yeah," James said, though his stomach churned. "You've already won in my eyes," she said. "No matter what happens tomorrow, you've shown the world what you're made of." "Thanks, Mom," James said, his voice cracking slightly. As he hung up, James closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow wasn't just about a fight, it was about proving, once and for all, that he belonged on the world stage. The night had finally arrived. Madison Square Garden was packed to the rafters, every seat filled with fans eager to witness what promised to be one of the most highly anticipated fights in boxing history. The air buzzed with anticipation as the crowd, a mix of die-hard Tyson Fury supporters and newfound James Turner fans, roared in unison. This wasn't just a fight, it was a spectacle. James Turner sat in his locker room, hands wrapped tightly in fresh gauze, his gloves resting beside him on the bench. The sound of the crowd echoed faintly through the walls, a distant roar that felt like the pulse of the city itself. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes, remembering the streets of Detroit, his mother's encouragement, and the kids at his academy. This fight wasn't just for him, it was for all of them. "All right, Turner," Hank said, leaning against a locker. "Time to prove to the world that the first fight wasn't a fluke." James opened his eyes, a fire burning in them. It wasn't. Across the hall, Tyson Fury was pacing in his locker room, a storm of emotions brewing inside him. He had been here before, on the edge of greatness, but tonight felt different. The pressure to reclaim his title, to restore his legacy, weighed heavily on him. Fury's trainer clapped him on the shoulder. "This is your night, champ. Show them who you are." Fury nodded, his face hard as stone. "Tonight, we settle this." The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, and the lights dimmed, signaling the start of the main event. James was introduced first, walking out to thunderous applause. His team followed closely, with Malik holding a Detroit flag and Hank walking stoically beside him. James kept his head down, the hood of his robe covering his face as he walked to the ring. The noise of the crowd was deafening, but he tuned it out, his focus unshakable. When it was Fury's turn, the arena exploded in cheers and boos. Fury entered the ring like a king returning to his throne, wearing a shimmering robe and a confident smirk. He waved to the crowd, his demeanor radiating self-assurance. As the two fighters stood in their corners, the referee called them to the center of the ring. "All right, gentlemen. You know the rules. Keep it clean, protect yourselves at all times. Touch gloves and let's get it on. James and Fury locked eyes, neither blinking. Fury leaned in slightly. This time, I'll end it quick. James didn't flinch. We'll see. The bell rang, and the fight was on. Fury started aggressively, using his size and reach to keep James at bay. He peppered James with jabs, forcing him to stay on the defensive. James moved carefully, his footwork precise, looking for openings but refusing to take unnecessary risks. He knew Fury's game plan was to dominate early, and he wasn't going to fall into the trap. The round ended with Fury landing a solid right hand, but James stayed on his feet. Back in his corner, Hank handed him a water bottle. Good. Let him think he's in control. Stick to the plan. In the second round, James began to find his rhythm. He ducked under Fury's punches, landing quick jabs to the body that visibly frustrated the larger man. Fury, however, wasn't about to let the momentum shift. He caught James with a hard uppercut that sent him staggering. The crowd erupted, sensing a potential knockout, but James clinched, buying precious seconds to recover. By the third round, both fighters were fully engaged. James's speed kept Fury on his toes, while Fury's power tested James's resilience. The tension in the arena was palpable, every punch felt like it could change the course of the fight. The fourth round brought the first major turning point. Fury cornered James against the ropes, unloading a flurry of punches that had the crowd on their feet. James's defense held, but just barely. Then, in a split-second opening, James countered with a devastating left hook to Fury's jaw. The impact echoed through the arena as Fury stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock. The crowd erupted as James pressed forward, landing another combination before the bell saved Fury. In his corner, Fury's trainer barked instructions, but the former champion looked shaken. Across the ring, James sat calmly, his confidence growing. "You got him rattled," Hank said. "Now finish the job." Fury came out swinging in the fifth round, determined to regain control. He landed a series of heavy blows that sent James reeling, the sheer power behind them forcing him onto the defensive. For a moment, it looked like Fury was on the verge of a knockout, but James dug deep, using his speed to escape the onslaught. He circled the ring, regaining his composure, and landed a quick jab to Fury's ribs that slowed him down. The round ended with both fighters breathing heavily, their faces showing the wear and tear of the battle. The sixth round was a test of willpower. Fury, visibly fatigued, began to slow, his punches less precise. James, though battered, sensed the shift and capitalized. He moved in close, landing a series of body shots that visibly hurt Fury. The crowd could feel the momentum shifting, their cheers growing louder with every punch James landed. Then, with seconds left in the round, James unleashed a perfectly timed uppercut that sent Fury sprawling to the canvas. The arena exploded as the referee began the count. 1, 2, 3. Fury struggled to his feet at the count of 8, but the damage was done. The bell rang, and James returned to his corner, his heart pounding with adrenaline. The seventh round began with James on the offensive. He moved with purpose, his punches sharp and precise, each one pushing Fury closer to defeat. Fury tried to fight back, but his movements were sluggish, his energy depleted. James saw his moment and seized it. A powerful right hook connected squarely with Fury's jaw, followed by a crushing left cross that sent the former champion crashing to the mat. The referee started the count, but it was clear Fury wasn't getting up. 7, 8, 9, 10. The bell rang, and the fight was over. James Turner had done it again. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting James's name as he raised his arms in victory. Fury sat in his corner, bloodied but gracious, nodding in acknowledgement of James's skill. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, the winner by knockout, James 'The Rock' Turner." As Hank embraced him, James looked out at the crowd, tears streaming down his face. He had proven himself once again, not just to the world, but to himself. In the post-fight interview, Fury approached James and extended his hand. "You're the real deal," Fury said, a small smile breaking through his bruised face. "You earned this." James shook his hand. "You're a legend, Fury." It was an honor. The roar of the Madison Square Garden crowd still echoed in James Turner's ears as he sat in the locker room, his gloves finally off, his hands wrapped in ice packs. His body ached in ways he'd never experienced before, but the pain was secondary to the overwhelming sense of accomplishment. He had done it again. The rematch wasn't just a victory, it was the confirmation James needed, the validation that his first win wasn't luck but the result of his grit, determination, and unrelenting belief in himself. The press conference following the fight was packed. James sat at the podium, his championship belt draped over his shoulder, flanked by Hank and Malik. The questions came quickly, a barrage of praise, analysis, and speculation about what was next for him. "James," one reporter began, "you've now defeated Tyson Fury twice, solidifying yourself as one of the greatest fighters of this generation. What does this win mean to you?" James leaned into the microphone, his voice steady but raw with emotion. "It means everything. I didn't just win this fight for myself, I won it for Detroit, for every kid who's ever been told they're not good enough. This is proof that anything is possible if you work for it." The room erupted in applause. After the press conference, Tyson Fury approached James backstage. Fury's face was battered, but his demeanor was respectful. "You've earned every bit of this, lad," Fury said, extending his hand. "You've got the heart of a champion. Don't let anyone take that from you." James shook his hand, feeling the weight of Fury's words. "You're a legend, Fury. This fight wouldn't have meant the same without you." Fury nodded, a small smile on his bruised face. "Take care of that title, Turner. And take care of yourself." When James returned to Detroit, he was greeted with a hero's welcome. Thousands lined the streets for a parade in his honor, cheering and waving as he rode through the city in an open car. His mom and Darnell sat beside him, their faces glowing with pride. At the celebration, James took the stage to address the crowd. "This isn't just my victory," he said, his voice amplified across the sea of faces. "This is our victory. This city raised me, shaped me, and gave me the strength to fight. Thank you for believing in me." The crowd erupted into cheers, chanting his name, "Turner, Turner, Turner." With the prize money from the rematch, James poured even more resources into his boxing academy. He expanded the facility, adding state-of-the-art equipment and classrooms for tutoring and mentorship programs. "This place isn't just about boxing," James told a local news station during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "It's about giving kids a chance to dream, to grow, and to fight for their futures." One of the Academy's first success stories was Marcus, the shy 13-year-old who had joined the gym after James's first fight. Under James's mentorship, Marcus had blossomed into a confident young man, winning several amateur fights and inspiring others in the community. "James taught me to believe in myself," Marcus said during an interview. "And now, I want to inspire the next kid, just like he inspired me." As James settled into his new life as a global icon, he faced the challenges that came with fame. He was pulled in 100 directions: endorsement deals, public appearances, and the constant pressure to maintain his status as champion. One night, as he sat in his kitchen, Hank joined him at the table. "You're doing great, kid," Hank said, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "But don't lose sight of what's important." James nodded, running a hand over his championship belt. "It's a lot, Hank. I'm grateful, but sometimes I miss when it was just me and the gym." Hank chuckled. "Fame's a double-edged sword. But as long as you stay true to yourself, you'll be all right." Offers began pouring in for James to transition into other areas: acting, commentating, even writing a book. Malik, ever the opportunist, encouraged him to consider his options. "Man, you could be the face of Hollywood," Malik said, flipping through a stack of proposals. "Or you could write a book about your journey. People would eat that up." James laughed. "I don't think the world's ready for me in a movie. But the book? Maybe. If it inspires people, I'm all for it." One day, James received an unexpected letter. It was from Tyson Fury. "James, I've had some time to reflect since our fight, and I wanted to say thank you. You didn't just beat me, you reminded me why I fell in love with the sport in the first place. Your story's one of hope, and it's inspired me to use my platform for something bigger. I'm starting a mentorship program for young fighters, and I owe that idea to you. Keep fighting the good fight. Respectfully, Tyson Fury." James folded the letter, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Fury's words meant more to him than any trophy or belt. As the months passed, James found himself reflecting on his journey. From the streets of Detroit to the pinnacle of the boxing world, he had overcome every obstacle in his path. But he knew his story wasn't over. "Life's a fight," James said during an interview. "You don't stop when you win one round. You keep going, keep pushing, because there's always more to achieve." James's story continued to inspire people around the world, and while he remained focused on boxing, he also embraced his role as a mentor, advocate, and role model. His fights were no longer just about titles, they were about leaving a legacy. One evening, as he walked through his academy, watching the kids train, James felt a deep sense of peace. He had become more than a champion, he had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of believing in yourself. And for James Turner, that was the greatest victory of all. What about you? Do you have a fight you're facing right now? Maybe it's not in a boxing ring, it could be in your career, your relationships, or just believing in yourself when the odds feel impossible. James Turner's story isn't just about boxing, it's about resilience, grit, and proving to yourself and the world that you're capable of greatness. We want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. What's the challenge you're fighting to overcome? Or tell us what this story inspired in you. Let's celebrate those moments of courage together, no matter how big or small. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of triumph, inspiration, and the human spirit. Because just like James, we all have the power to turn our struggles into victories. So, go out there and fight your fight. You never know who you might inspire. Until next time, keep believing, keep pushing, and remember, the underdog always has a shot.